Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today, yes, we're going to talk about Chaos again, but this time a different type of Chaos. I've been building up some Chaos Dwarfs lately, so I'd like to talk about them in a video and their possible playstyle in Total War Warhammer 3. So without further ado, let's begin. The Dwarfs and the Chaos Dwarfs are the exact same race, this much is true. It's very important to note that all dwarf subcultures are from the same progenitor, but that in itself does not mean that they'll play in the exact same way. In fact, they're all very drastically different, and this is why I want to talk about the Chaos Dwarfs today. From chaos magic to even having some bound demons, the Chaos Dwarfs themselves are a rather interesting subculture of the dwarfs. Before anything, it's important to note that there were two different iterations of the Chaos Dwarfs, that of a previous army book way back in the day, and the most recent one is from a supplement that was introduced in 8th edition. Both of them in reality work very much in the same way. The only real difference is usually just aesthetic. The army didn't really change that much. Now, what some people are actually expecting in terms of playstyle is very much evil dwarfs, and technically they aren't wrong. The Chaos Dwarfs are very much evil dwarfs if you want to be very specific. There will be some parallels in terms of playstyle. Very powerful artillery, slow moving units but often very heavily armoured. Standard range weaponry will also be quite powerful too. And of course, since they are dwarfs, you can very much expect very high leadership. These aren't the typical units that you can expect to rout very often. But that's where the similarities do change, so let's start jumping into some specifics. First off, the army itself should have some variety, as there are two races that actually fill out the ranks of the Darwizar. And no, I'm not referring to the demons, but instead the dwarfs themselves and also the hobgoblins. We'll talk about the Chaos Dwarfs first. So, when it comes to melee, as expected with the dwarfs, they are quite staunch, they're quite powerful, they're able to take a lot of punishment and deal punishment too. This is the case for both ranged and melee. You can expect the same way as the dwarfs. Very strong lines for defensive purposes, and your guns will be, well, devastating. In fact, Chaos Dwarfs in the tabletop had such a powerful gun line that they wouldn't really have too much of an issue deleting certain units, depending on the chosen ranged weaponry, of course. I know some people are probably thinking that this might be a bit overpowered, but then again, the dwarfs themselves are in a pretty good state, so it's very much just balancing on that. Artillery, on the other hand, was a tad more powerful than the standard dwarfs. In fact, Chaos Dwarf artillery, especially in 8th edition, was very punishing. If you've played the Chaos Dwarf mod for Total War Warhammer 2, you'll more or less have the gist of it already. It's been implemented in a very lore-friendly sense when it comes to it. I've seen some people complaining about the mod being too powerful for artillery, but that's literally how they were on the tabletop. The Dreadquake Mortar, for example, was actually so good, it pretty much deleted a unit of my Chaos Demons on the tabletop with just a single shot. I am very much assuming that for balancing purposes, because the artillery is often seen as so overpowered, the Chaos Dwarf artillery might be behind some unit cap in a very similar sense to how the Tomb Kings have it too. Some people might not like this idea, but bear in mind if we look towards Warhammer 2, more specifically Queen Bess for the Vampire Coast. That is an incredibly powerful artillery piece, and you may only have one active at each given time throughout your campaign. Now, the Dreadquake Mortar is very much like Queen Bess, so imagine being able to field them without any issues. But don't worry, this doesn't mean that the Chaos Dwarfs will lack in anything else, as now they have a bunch of unique stuff on the way. First, we'll talk about what I guess we can call Dwarf Cavalry. Yep, they have cavalry. Bull Centaurs are very much Chaos Dwarf beastmen in a certain sense. Powerful like Centaurs and sometimes even larger depending on what representation they go for, but with the intelligence of a dwarf. These are fast-moving line-breaker cavalry, and like I said, there's two different implementations. One much smaller and one much larger. I think that they'll much likely go with the larger option, as of course the larger option is the most recent. Think of this as molding Centaurs with Minotaurs. Already the physical strength for the Chaos Dwarfs outweighs that of the normal dwarfs. That's also further enhanced with various different demon elementals, like for example the Kadai. You're going to have a lot of different big beasties to be able to use here. What you lack in terms of monsters for the dwarfs, this roster more than makes up for it with the Chaos Dwarfs. The standard dwarfs themselves normally work in a very defensive type of playstyle. You stand back in a defensive line with loads of artillery firing at your enemy, and yes, you can play that with the Chaos Dwarfs too, but the army is also very much able to play offensively. Considering the fact that your artillery is quite mobile and you've got a lot of big monsters, it's not really much of a problem to move forward and meet your enemies head on. You're also further supported by your own unique lore of magic, the lore of Hashut. Yes, these are dwarves with a specific lore of magic. The lore of Hashut itself, in both iterations, was pretty well balanced, mostly centered around a healthy mix of direct damage spells and also hexes. This is a race that wants to do damage and wants to do it quickly. So as you can see, there's already a massive difference when it comes to dwarfs and Chaos Dwarfs, but then it is further added on when you add in their reinforcement numbers in the form of Hobgoblins. Yes, the Chaos Dwarfs have two specific races playing about them. Now, the Hobgoblins themselves act as their frontline throwaway units. Hobgoblins are not as weak as standard goblins like night goblins or even forest goblins. Instead, they are more comparable to orcs. The addition of hobgoblins would fill out your roster in a multitude of different ways. Firstly, hobgoblins themselves should be considered quite cheap. They are most likely going to be the first units that you'd be able to recruit in your armies, and you'd have a variety of different units with them. Basic hand weapons, possibly even some spears too, bows, and wolf riders. This is to further push the fact that you can be aggressive in your playstyle. Your dwarfs will still be relatively slow, but since you have fast moving monsters and artillery, you're going to need something that can keep up. This is of course if you want to go pure hammer and anvil. Your hobgoblins will likely act as your front moving line to hold your enemy down whilst your dwarfs get closer and closer. I don't imagine them being too useful later campaign, as of course as you start getting stronger and much more powerful dwarf units, they'll eventually fizzle away. But as you can see through this, if we go by lore friendly and tabletop implementation, which of course is the focus of these videos, and knowing that Creative Assembly tried to bring in the spirit of the tabletop itself into Total War, it's very likely that they'll play in a very comparable sense to, say for example, the Empire rather than the dwarfs themselves. Better yet, think about it like the Empire being mixed up with the Beastmen, your skirmishing frontline infantry in the form of hobgoblins, with some added wolf riders to be able to act as your war machine hunters, some heavy long range artillery, monstrous units of different ways, shapes and forms, powerful magic to complement your loadouts, and then finally of course your gun line, which is extremely common when playing as any faction that has access to, well, gunpowder based weaponry. It is the best type of range weaponry and it will always be in this game, I'm imagining. Of course, I could be wrong here and Creative Assembly could have a completely different vision when it comes to the Chaos Dwarfs alongside Games Workshop, but I'd say barring the aesthetic and obviously certain units, the Chaos Dwarfs through all their years in the tabletop and in lore has very much stayed in the same representation. So what do you guys think about the possible playstyle of the Chaos Dwarfs being like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a bit of a discussion. As a quick side note, if it comes to the whole thing about the style of aesthetic, I personally hope that Creative Assembly will do the implementation of both styles. The old big hat style is very iconic, but I really did like the style implemented for 8th edition, as that was just kinda cool. It looked really grim and it gave this whole chaos theme. The other stuff was obviously more centered around a Babylonian type of aesthetic, which is also still pretty cool, but I think a healthy mix of the both could work out really well and keep everyone happy. I know the majority of people prefer a big hat aesthetic, but you know, I just like them both. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.